Everything seems pretty positive.
That's the new.
And this is news why?
Well,
It's in my foot, sir.
So this is basically the spreadsheet?
Put the camera?
Yep, sure.
Skip, what is that?
It's a camera.
Camera or speaker?
Camera.
Oh, it is?
Uh-oh, wait a minute, I didn't
Yeah.
do my hair.
I'm on to, oh, just gonna fix your hair. I thought it was a speaker or something.
No.
Is
It
it
looks like a
wireless?
speaker.
Yeah. Well, it can be a number of things. The camera part is actually this.
Really?
This is just a 10-hour battery.
Oh, what is all this?
Plus, it allows me to connect, do other connections. This is, I can put it in record mode, which is it's in right now, just standalone. It can also connect via Wi-Fi to my smartphone, and I can control it from that. I can also control it with software that's on my laptop, which gives me multi-camera angles, just like a WMUR broadcast. I can also connect it up with Ethernet, because if I go to a large venue to cover it, then everybody's got their phones on Wi-Fi, so it really degrades the signal from this. So yeah, it does a lot of different things.
You don't wanna ask how much it is.
The whole kit, including a couple other accessories and a tripod, is $800 each. But for what I do outside of here,
Yes.
you know, it's
Lot
good,
to be on the budget committee, but for other things.
and that's the reason why I bought it.
Yeah.
Never had candy?
If I do political roundtables or interviews and things like this, 2 of these cameras are perfect.
Yeah, that's cool.
The only downside is that it has no zoom capability. It's a fixed length focus lens. So this is about as far as apart as I would
Can you
use.
see through it on that side? Or?
No, but there is an arrow on the top, so I can kind of do it.
Oh, okay.
But sometimes attaching to a Wi-Fi system gets to be a little difficult. So
having
there
it
we
be
go.
a little bit past 6:30, I will call this meeting to order. We do have a quorum present, and I would ask that all cell phones be either turned off or on vibrate, and if you need to use it, please go to the lobby of the town hall. Mr. Vice Chair, if you could please lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before the approval of the minutes, I have some announcements that have to be made. First of all, just a reminder that this coming Monday, the 5th of November, the Gilford School Board will be presenting the public information for the upcoming budget, and it will be in the auditorium at 7 o'clock in the Gilford High School. Also, for all those that are taking minutes of these subcommittee meetings, could you please have the minutes that you've taken signed and given to Angela so she can submit them to Denise to be submitted for the record? Is that correct, Angela?
Yes, that's correct. I get them first so I can put them on the website and then I'll submit to her.
Is our finance committee's minutes summary of the subcommittee, is that here tonight?
It is not here tonight because we're not discussing those
Oh, we're not
tonight.
doing
No,
that.
no,
Okay.
no, but you just, the
But I have
original
them
copy.
ready
I
for when
saw
you
that Glenn
do.
was here on the agenda. so,
Okay.
yeah. Okay. No.
Also, the 27th of November, the meeting that was scheduled to be here for the presentation by Kirk Beitler has been moved from Guilford Town Hall to the library at Guilford High School due to a scheduling conflict with the zoning board.
Okay, so that's going to,
The library at the high school, the 27th.
so our meeting, or
Our meeting is there.
at the library at the high school.
That's a
6:30.
Tuesday.
That's the Tuesday after Thanksgiving vacation.
Tuesday.
And that is it, and if anybody has had a chance or needs a chance to peruse the minutes of the meeting, I'll give them a minute or two.
Can you pass this down to Angela, please?
What if I say no?
You can write some new minutes up if you want to.
Just thought I'd ask.
The 27th.
At 6:30 p.m.?
At 6:30.
I know you
And
Parks and
will
Rec.
it be here?
Yes,
or-
please.
No, it's at the
All
high
right,
school.
that one's at the high school library.
We can get a complete handout like we did last time, didn't we? In the town.
Monday at
Clear up like the yellow code.
Public information
I
meeting.
don't remember getting one, but now I'm second guessing myself.
This is what you got. So like.
Yeah,
So I mean, for the overview, we're doing the financial oversight. Last time we got, all right.
This way because you should.
Okay.
My apologies to the board.
Yep, that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Has anybody had a chance to look at the minutes? Any discussion? I'll entertain a motion then.
Make a motion to accept the meeting minutes of October 25th, 2018 as presented.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And any abstention? And one abstention. And now I will turn the floor over to, I believe, Mr. McDonough. Are you doing the report?
Yeah, I can. I'm just trying to get caught up since we have new
Okay.
sheets here in front of me.
And Chief, while Mr. McDonough's getting caught up, on behalf of, no, you can sit. On behalf of the Budget Committee, if you could wish Jim Leach a happy retirement for us.
Chris, which page is the police in?
13.
Page 13.
Yellow binder, yellow tab.
Yeah, no, let's skip, this is the updates.
Yeah.
Oh,
These are the new budgets.
oh, yes.
Where is the three?
Page 13.
Thank you. Good, good. Yeah, that's fine.
All right. So clearly, all the changes are up top there in the town administrator's area. So, on October 25th, at 4:30 at the police department, there was a subcommittee meeting. We had Chief Burpee, Deputy Chief Kelly, Jack Kelly, Sue Green, and myself. We went through the budget line by line. Discussed everything in pretty good detail. I'm going to start down in the I would call the police department controllable stuff that they actually budget. There was a significant decrease in the computer expenses of $8,000, $8,117. That was a result of a spike last year, first year of a 5-year contract for Exacom software that had an upfront large expense that has now stabilized for the next 4 years, if I understand correctly. Okay. Let's see here. I'm going to come back to retirement. And I'm gonna come back to animal control. But, let's see. Vehicle fuels is down $6,700, purely the result of the price used to calculate, correct?
Correct.
The equipment and supplies up $2,400, that's for the purchase of 2 service rifles. The only other, there was a major increase of capital expense of $25,000 for the building of the evidence impound lot behind the police station. This will be a 60 by 90 area fenced in with a gate, barbed wire on the top, either gravel or reclaimed asphalt. And possibly another gate to limit access to the back of the police station area, if there are funds.
Is that special projects?
That is special projects, yep.
Okay.
And the $3,500 increase,
Excuse me, Chris?
yeah.
Will that also include surveillance camera? Or
It
cameras?
is on camera already, or?
Yeah, it's cameras, what we have now, there'll be no additional cameras added.
Okay, none needed.
So I don't know if that's correct.
Okay,
There are some needed, we do have cameras in the back of the building. In a perfect world, this impound lot would be away from the back of the building, so I would like to have cameras there. But in the meantime, right now, just to keep the cost within reason and to get the actual lot in there.
okay. Can the present cameras be reoriented better for the impound?
They can, but from a distance, yes, we'd have better viewing if we had something that was closer.
Okay.
This includes a fence.
Fenced, yeah. Taser and body cameras is up $3,500. Now I put in the minutes that that was the result of taser and body cameras for new officers. One new officer?
Right.
Correct, okay.
If they just have that, do you want me to go up to the building?
Yeah, please.
So currently, right now, I have tasers and bodies cameras for the entire department. I'm involved and wrapped up what's called a TAP program, a Taser Assurance Plan, so it's a 5-year program. As part of that program, we get all of our equipment, free unlimited storage. Every 2.5 years, we get new cameras. Every 5 years, we get new tasers. When I originally got these and entered into the 5-year program, I had one less officer than I do now. So what they do is, Officer McNeil's my newest officer. He needs a camera and a taser. So he's currently on the road working. So to get that for him, what they do now, instead of starting a new 5-year program, they just were entering year 3 of my 5-year program. So they just wrap that price into year 3, 4, and 5.
So back to animal control. We discussed this, Jack Kelly raised the question of we are repeatedly 3 years that are on record here, and I don't know much more previously, but we have not been spending the money that has been allocated for that line item. So the subcommittee members recommended a decrease in that line item to $15,000 to better reflect the actual expenditures of that line item. That is, animal control is budgeted at $22,600. The last 3 years' actuals were 12.8, 14.5, and 13.1.
Is that still a contract, on a contract basis?
So, yeah, so out of that 22.6, I've been working, the numbers, I started in 2014, we started a discussion about having an animal control officer start in 2015. The town managers of Belmont and Gilford and the city manager from Laconia met. and we came up with a part-time ACO. At that time, $15,000 was the figure that was given to Gilford. I erroneously thought that that was a set figure. The clarification from Scott is it was an estimate of what Gilford could be expected to spend. The ACO works under the jurisdiction of the city of Laconia and is paid through the city. So we get billed, the captain or the lieutenant over there, whoever oversees her, is the one that sends us bills throughout the year that we pay for that. So the only fixed fee out of this entire animal control line item, out of those three, actually is the $7,000 for the Humane Society contract. The $600 for medical services, supplies, and miscellaneous. It's typically been $500. I added $600 this year. We have a new canine. He had some stomach issues, so I just wanted to make sure we had enough to cover in the meantime. So as Chairperson McDonough said, looking at, I thought originally it was just that our fiscal year ran different from Laconia, so that we weren't getting necessarily billed for the entire $15,000. But after Scott's clarification, that is just an estimate of what we pay. We're not getting billed nearly that. When I just wait for those bills to come in from the city of Laconia, they figure it out and they break it down to the jurisdictions, and we just pay it that way.
Yeah, just because I'm a little out of date, having just come back on, I don't think this came up last year. We used to pay just the Humane Society to take care of animal control. I take it now with this new agreement with Gilmanton and Laconia, there is an actual ACO, as you said, that takes care of that, and then the Humane Society steps in as the holder of the animal. Is that how that works?
Yeah, well, I don't think the Humane Society ever acted in the capacity of the ACO.
No, we would
correct?
bring animals to them.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So now we have a specialist to do that.
Right. So the
Okay.
Humane Society breaks down, everybody in Belknap County gets a portion of that, that's what we pay to them. And that's for the boarding of animals and everything else, certainly above that. So
Okay.
before we had the ACO, and when the ACO, she's only part-time when she's not working, our officers always in the past, before we had an animal control officer, would deal with these animal calls. Now, when the ACO is on, she deals with them in all three towns.
Okay.
And when she's not working, we still do, but we are able to bring the animals up there, that contract separate from the ACO.
And how many hours per whatever unit?
The ACO?
Yes.
She works a total of 32 hours between 3 communities.
Each week?
Yes.
Okay.
And how many animals would you say we transport a year up there?
Good question, I don't know. She brings everything from dogs and cats to everything else.
Really?
Yeah, so,
But is it numbers of them, or
yeah, yes.
10 or 20?
Yeah, I
or-
could certainly find it from her, I could have a report run from her.
I'd be curious.
Yeah. Right,
See,
correct.
No, go ahead.
no, it's okay.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but when this was set up, Laconia generously donated the van and they maintain it, so that costs us nothing.
Yeah, so up front, she uses a van that's through, and we, when she's in our town, she fills up with our gas, if she's in Belmont, she fills up with their gas. They outfitted her with uniforms and everything else, so they just break down, a bill through all three, jurisdictions.
No, thanks.
Okay. So I'm gonna go back up to the top now, to the wages. Obviously, you can see by the memo from Scott that the Board of Selectmen made some changes. So the full-time wages is now up $33,411. Part-time wages up $2,000, and overtime up $24,842. This is a topic that we discussed at length at our subcommittee meeting as well. It's the feeling of the chief and deputy chief that the overtime has been under budgeted on a regular basis, not realistic budget numbers for that, based on the fact that we have certain expectations as far as the number of officers that are on duty all the time, and we are short officers. We have one that's vacant and another one that has been training. So that explains the request for more overtime compensation to more adequately fund that line item. Holiday pays up $5,000 for. Now, who would answer these questions? You or Scott?
Those numbers Scott figures it out specifically, but as far as the holiday pay, if you have a specific question, either one of us could probably answer.
Yeah, I'm just curious if that's a proportionate increase or Is there a reason that increased significantly?
Based on their pay.
Well, again, I think, what throws off a lot of the increases is, last year there was in the police budget, there was a $77,000 line item for the hiring of 2 new police officers for half of a year. This budget has those positions included in the appropriate line item for wages, holiday pay, merit pay, all of those things for those 2 new positions over the course of the whole year. So that's why all of those numbers are inflated, because it's no longer part of a $77,000 initial package. Now they're broken out into what those actual costs are estimated to be.
Were those 2 officers hired?
No.
They were not.
Well, one was, the other, we've held 2 hiring processes this year, and we've had no viable candidates. So I'm entering into 2019, was still a vacant position, and now recently, following the lieutenant's retirement, potentially I would promote somebody, I would have another vacancy. A sergeant moves up, somebody gets promoted to sergeant, I'd have another patrol vacancy, so I'll be entering next year potentially with 2 vacancies.
Now, when you said viable candidates, does that mean no one applied, or those that applied were not good enough, or?
It means that those did not pass through the initial stage of the application process, either the physical written test, or the physical portion of it, or the interview portion.
Okay, how many people actually did apply?
So the first round that we had, how many showed up the first time, back in June?
Yeah, less than 10, probably 5 or 6.
Yeah, 6. This last time, so this is typically how this works, is that, and as I explained to the subcommittee, and I'll just go through it here real quick, Great Bay Community College holds a testing process for anybody interested in getting into criminal justice. We get those dates when they're holding that process. When that happens, we get all of the testing results. We then tailor our hiring process around that test. At this particular time, for example, just last month, we had a hiring process. We sent out invitations to 78 people who took that test to come and sit for Gilford's test. Our testing process starts in the morning with a written test. If you pass that, you move on to a physical agility test. If you pass that, then you move on to an oral panel interview. And then from there, recommendations are made to me. Then there's a chief's interview, and then we go from there. Out of the 78 invitations we sent out, 6 people said they would show up to take our test. Out of those 6, I think only 4 showed. Out of those 4 that showed, or 3 showed actually, 2 failed the test, and 1 failed the PT. So now I'm down to 0. So that's what I mean by no viable candidates, and the same thing happened back in June when we held that process as well.
If we can anticipate eventually filling these both positions and having both officers in full-time employment post their training periods and initiation period or whatever, can we expect to see any decline in the overtime budget at all?
Yes. And the numbers, so there's a breakdown. I don't know, was that list shared with everybody that I gave? I know that Mr. Murphy had it in several others. I had been asked to create a list as to what actually goes into the overtime budget or where that money comes from. So I recall standing in this very position last year and was asked that same exact question by Chairperson McDonough, and said yes. I couldn't guarantee what was going to happen in 2019 because my anticipation was I'd have to hire an officer, get him and her through the academy, and then through an FTO program. And the only way I'm going to see that those numbers significantly in our overtime budget go down for covering shifts that need to be filled is once they are completely out of the academy, full-time, on their own, in an actual patrol schedule, in a rotation. I can do that. Unfortunately, as most agencies go, and perhaps the agencies you work for, I haven't run full staff since I've been here in 4 years. And that's not uncommon, in my 20 years in law enforcement, I've never been in an agency where you're granted this many positions and you try to run full staff, something happens somewhere. Somebody's out either for sick, or you have vacant positions, or you lose people, and you're just always trying to get caught up. So yes, in a perfect world, if I have my full complement of officers and get them into the positions that I want them in, staffing-wise, and get them into a patrol position, then yes.
I find it amazing that you have that many people. 78 is what you said, 78?
We sent 78 invitations.
78 invitations out of even more, and only basically 3 showed up. What do you think is the bottom cause of, what do you think the underlying problem is?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of things. I think one, it surprises me. I don't think there is a lot of the younger generation that's necessarily staying in New Hampshire. We've heard that, so I think that they're looking for jobs and they're going elsewhere. They're just probably up here, particularly if they're taking a Great Bay test. They're from that area, and they're taking, but I also think that, you know, and the other thing, we're going through union negotiations. I think our pay as well, our starting pay. You know, I think our benefits package and what we have is great to, is great to promote, in the amount of overtime that we're able to offer during the, you know, summer months with the Bank of New Hampshire Pavilion. You know, but quite honestly, our starting pay right now going into, we're the lowest in Belknap County. We start a full-time officer at $19.14 an hour. State average is around 21 and change. There are other agencies, you know, state police, you can go and start making $22 or $23 an hour, get a take-home car. But there's, you know, and that unfortunately, you know, the big thing that the deputy chief and I do, that we try to do when we get, because typically when you get people that are applying for law enforcement, as you know, they're, I say kids in their 20s. They just look at how much I'm making an hour. So we really try to drive home that there's an entire package here, including health insurance and family plans and overtime and everything else that a small agency has to offer. You know, this last process we had in June, that's exactly what I did to sell to this candidate or this applicant that was coming through, whether he wanted to stay here or go to the state police. Ultimately, he decided he wanted to go to the state police, and then at the last minute bailed from that process and wanted to come back here. But you know, we'd already been down that road, and I didn't think it was going to be a good fit, so on he moved. But
one other question: is there any type of bonus incentive package for those that do stay? Do we have anything like get through the first year and then year?
Nope, I think that actually, you know, we just had that discussion. The town administrator, I think, is looking into that. That has been something that's been proposed. We just don't know, I guess, from a legal standpoint, whether that can be done or what we can do at that point. But there are agencies out there that are doing that. It's not uncommon. Again, when I came from Maine, I mean, a lot of agencies have these signing bonuses with there's parameters on it, and it is, that money speaks to get people in the door. You know, and, you know, as far as I'm concerned, we have a great agency, and if I can get them into the door, you know, I mean, I can keep them here. You know, our retention at this particular point is not an issue. I've lost 4 officers since I've been here at the helm, but only 1 has left to go to the state police. Others have either retired, gotten out of the profession, or gotten out of the profession altogether. They haven't left to transfer to another agency. The one who went to state police, his ultimate goal has always been to be a state trooper. So,
thank
you.
Yeah. Question about, it sounds like you're looking for a newbie coming in to learn, to go through the academy and all this. What does it take, I mean, do police officers move from department to department, and is it a possibility, and, you know, I guess it would be a higher wage, you're looking for a lower wage? Is that, how can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so when we have a hiring process, anybody's welcome to apply. So certainly I would love to get somebody who's what's called certified, that's been through the academy. That saves me the money that I can get them right off and get them into a position. So here, 2 years ago, I had a position open for a detective. I hired somebody who had 18 years experience in the state of New Hampshire through various agencies, so he came in. Sometimes it's kind of a catch-22 when you hire people from another agency. You know, they've been there 15 years, 20 years. Yeah, I mean, and so they come in, so yeah, I'm not offering them a starting salary of $19.14. I am able to make an argument to Scott and to the board as to what I'd like to bring them in at, given their years of experience, but also being, you know, cognizant of the fact that, you know, they're coming, while they have 10 years of experience, they don't have 10 years of experience here in Gilford. So I want to pay them, you know, what they're worth, but I also need to be cognizant that I have people here that have done 10 or 12 years here in Gilford, so I need to work that out. The other thing sometimes you get, unfortunately, just from other people who have been in another agency 10 or 12 years, I don't know what I'm getting for a product, you know? If you get somebody who's new, like I was when I started, or the deputy chief was when he started, I can mold that officer to be what I want him or her to be within the agency and to be the Gilford police officer that I see as that we are. And that's hard to do sometimes when you have somebody who has 10 or 12 years on under several other chiefs and have all this other stuff that's going on. But it's, we don't turn, they come and sit for a test and they go through all the same process as everybody else does. So one thing I have been adamant about across the board, and you know, I've read a lot of things about this across the country, everybody's hurting, a lot of agencies are hurting for this. I have read though that a lot of chiefs you know, are lowering their standards just to get people in the door. You know, my stance on that is I'm holding firm, I'm not going to do that. That's going to come back to bite us in the end. So there's a reason why we have standards, and I'm not going to, you know, say not give somebody a polygraph or a psych, or not put them through the PT, or not make them do this just so I can fill an empty space, because I think that that's just detrimental to the agency.
So our package that we offer is pretty comparable with other agencies throughout. It's the pay is less than
Yeah, so I think, yeah, so I haven't compared, Scott would be the one to, compare health insurances and everything else. I mean, I think we are comparable, in Belknap County. I think our starting pay is a little low, but I think, the flip side of that is we also have a lot of availability for overtime, particularly with the concert venue here. And we have a lot of these outside details and, school details and other stuff, that we can do, so.
Something a little different, I don't know if we're done with this just yet, but I guess it's staffing. How much staff goes towards Meadowbrook? I know we talked about it a little bit last year, and, the overload and the work, the overtime, did they pay us? Can you give us a little,
Yeah, so all those details that any officers work at Meadowbrook, those are all paid through them. So, typically in the course of a year, Meadowbrook probably pays the town upwards of $80 to $95, $100,000 for detail officers across the board. As you know, we don't staff those entire concerts all with us because we don't have enough, so we reach out to outside agencies. So we have people from Belknap County, and sometimes we can't draw on them. We have other agencies that come up. So all that is paid for. The discussions have been in the past. Yes, if I have an officer that works a concert detail from 4 and we get off at 11 o'clock at night, they sign up for that. All that is billed to Meadowbrook. But after 11 o'clock at night, they have a felony arrest. There's new rules in the state where reports have to be done under this felony first. People have to be arraigned in a certain amount of time, so those reports need to be done. That officer might need to stay an extra hour to get that report done to make sure it's ready for the next morning so our prosecutor can go to court and have it ready. That hour of overtime, is on the town. That officer signs up, but the first 8 hours that he or she worked is all billed to Meadowbrook. so there's a trade-off there.
so it's billed by the town, it comes into the town from Meadowbrook,
Yep.
and then we pay that officer.
Correct. And right now, our detail rate's $65 an hour. So for every officer that works in Meadowbrook detail, they are being billed $65 an hour for that officer.
And what's the rate do they get?
They get 50 of that, and the rest goes to town for administrative expenses.
So when they do say they do an arrest there during that 8-hour period, or I notice in the summertime it's fully loaded with, custody for, drinking underage, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
I see it all the time, and it's long. When they have to come back and they have to fill out all that paperwork, it's on the town, isn't it?
Yeah,
Cost.
to a certain extent. So if they have reports that are just like, we're taking people in for protective custody or unlawful possession, which is a lot of what we do, all those reports can be done the next time the officer is in on duty. Our patrol officers work 12 hours, so they do that on duty. I'm just saying, if there's a major...
Okay, so it's not an additional
Exactly,
overtime
right.
cost.
Yes. Not every show do I have, 6 officers sitting here having to get reports done. It's major crimes that we have to deal with. If there's assaults, if there's anything that has to do with violence, any felony-related stuff, and that needs to be done. If we deal with domestics in the parking lot, those things are urgent. Those reports need to be done. All the other, civil infractions or misdemeanor infractions, those reports can wait till the officer's on duty. He or she does it then. So that's not costing the town anything.
Yeah.
Other than their regular hourly pay.
Yeah, Chief, could you refresh my memory of this overtime or detail work? Does that also contribute to retirement costs?
So I guess it depends. It's for only a certain number of officers, right? Anybody hired after 2001 is not. So, for example, mine, I am not included in that, but like the deputy chief is.
Most of the agency is not at this point.
Okay.
Probably 95%.
I knew that there was a split,
Yeah.
but, okay.
We have a lot of new officers. Or a lot of young people, like that. No offense.
That just makes me-
Yeah, I know. He may be younger than I am.
So just maybe, Chief, to clarify that a bit, if someone does, I don't know, for the sake of argument, someone does $20,000 worth of overtime in a year, in the last couple of years before they retire, that incremental doesn't cost the town any more in the actual retirement benefits that we have to pay. That part doesn't contribute?
So overtime earnings are assessed for retirement wages, so it does count towards their income and their eventual benefits. So whatever they earn in overtime, we're paying 29% into the retirement state.
So is overtime and detail different, is that?
Yes.
All right, so detail, what happens with detail?
That's, the detail is a time frame. I think it is 2001, where if you were employed as an officer before that day, your detail does count towards retirement, and again, that doesn't cost the town anything, that's paid by the people hiring the detail. And if you're afterwards, it doesn't count towards your retirement.
Go ahead, Sam.
Different subject, going back to what you said on the equipment for 2 service rifles. Rifles or shotguns or one of each?
Yeah, we don't carry shotguns, rifles.
Okay.
Yep, these are rifles.
ARs?
Yes, well, they're they're 6-hour M6s?
I think they're M400.
M400.
Okay.
Modern sporting rifles.
What's that?
I said they're modern
They're
sporting
modern
rifles.
yeah.
Do you equip them with any kind of accessories?
We do, yep, we have red optic sights on there and, slings and everything else, so, my rationale in doing that is right now, as I explained to the subcommittee, I have 10 rifles that belong to the department right now. They're placed in our frontline cruisers. All of our cruisers are shared by at least 2 officers. In a perfect world, everybody's issued a taser, everybody's issued a camera, everybody's issued a sidearm, everybody should have their own rifle. That just hasn't been the case. Recently, we went to the range to qualify. One of our rifles was not operating correctly. I have 4 firearms instructors. Several of them are armorers. They looked at the rifle, they tried to fix it, we had to take it out of service, it wasn't working properly. Now I'm down to 9. As I've said in the past, if we have a critical incident here and I need to call out officers, I would like to, in a perfect world, as Rags can tell you on being a part of this SWAT team, and send everybody to this call with a sidearm and a rifle. And I can't do that now. So everything we have done in the years past to me getting here, and prior to me getting here, as the deputy chief can tell you, for as far as firearms or as far as weapons, have all been fundraising efforts. We've all done it on our own. Even when we switch guns from our Glocks to our SIGs. So I'm just now looking to try to bring my complement of rifles up to where it needs to be by starting with asking for 2 right now.
Chief, if you ever need more guns, you call. We'll be there.
Yeah.
Chris, you all set?
I just would like some clarification on the wages in general. Now, merit wages are tracked separately on a separate line item. So what affects full-time wages if it's not merit increases?
So the merit pay that people receive in 2018 will show up as part of their base wage in 2019.
So this 18,444 is a merit increase for 19.
Correct.
And let's see, so health insurance obviously took a big increase. That was, I read that it was someone changed to a family plan.
Someone recently who got married, yep.
Okay. And the decrease in dental insurance of 9,000 was just a reduction in rates or a reduction in usage or both?
No, the new union contract has a provision where employees can get their health insurance through the union, and that health insurance package includes dental. So that's the big drop in there is because, I think 10 of the union employees are in a different healthcare plan that includes a dental insurance, so we're not actually paying for them to have a dental policy.
Does that plan cost us more money?
No, it's about break even.
Okay, good. And my last thing that I want to talk about was the retirement cost. It doesn't seem proportionate to the amount of increase in salary. So I'm just curious of that calculation. Is it in fact a real percentage of our total wages?
Yes, it is. All of the wages, and so half the year it's budgeted at 29.43%, and then the other half of the year it's budgeted at 28.43%.
And that is the first 5 lines: full-time, part-time, overtime, holiday, accrual.
Would not include part-time. But it would include the wages, includes merit, includes accrual, holiday pay,
No overtime.
and overtime.
what were the percentages, what was the aggregate percentage? It was 28
So
and
the first half of the
29?
year is 29.43,
Yeah,
and the second half of the year is 28.43.
okay, so it's 9.3, 28.93 overall. Is that right?
Yeah, we take the wage rate and we
Right.
divide half of it and use the 29.43, and then
Right.
the other half is.
But it's about 28.93%.
Tracy, you have
That would be the average.
It's
That would
actually
be
another
average.
line.
Go ahead.
As far as PD for professional development, it looks like you're not asking for enough. What is required of the officers for PD, and how come we're underfunded here?
So this year, oh, so are you saying not enough because I've gone
So,
over?
professional development, one year there was a dip, but for the most part, you know, if you go back to 16, 15 was allocated, came closer to 17. Last year, we had 18 allocated, it was closer to 20.
Yep.
You're requesting only 18 again. Just wondering if there's gonna be a shortfall in what you require for PD,
Yeah.
is it required?
No, there had been some, I think, you know, I had ended the year with money in that budget. One of the things that comes out of there, as you see in my breakdown, is about $7,500 in ammunition expenses. You know, so there are a lot of trainings that are required of the officers, annual trainings, that they can get at the academy for free. There are some outside trainings, you know, depending on what the specialty is. We try to get every officer to be involved in something, find something that they, you know, have a passion in, whether it's accident reconstruction or, you know, DWI enforcement or something else, and then, you know, we'll send them to the training to get them done on that, so. And then one of the things I added this year, you'll notice is or last year rather, much to the chagrin probably of much of my staff, is this Police One Academy online training for about $2,000, and with that, I can do a couple of different things, and that is I can take all of my policies and upload them, and require all the officers to go and review them and then electronically sign them, so now in fact, instead of handing them a big SOP book and assuming that they've read them, which is their responsibility, I now have signatures. With those, I can create quizzes, so I have to take quizzes to do that. In addition, to meet Academy standards, every officer above and beyond what they're required to do every year have to have an additional 12 to 13 hours of additional training. So every month now, all of my patrol personnel and communications personnel, I have gone through and put together a training plan, and they have to do either an hour or 2 hours worth of training every month online to meet that requirement, so at the end of the year, that's already met. So that's all included in the 2,000, so that helps bring that, you know, price down as well.
Do those officers get reimbursed for their time for participating in this?
No, they do it while they're on shift. The only people that get reimbursed, I have 2 part-time officers that do that. So unless they, you know, they maybe work a sporadic Friday night or something, so if they don't do that, if they do it at home, they're allowed to sign up. The other officers all do it on shift, so, you know, out of 120, 260 hours in a month to find an hour to do a training on shift, they can certainly do that.
Chris, anything else?
One more question on the retirement again. Scott, is that budgeted wages in the same year, or is it the previous year?
It's this year's, everything that's in the budget for this year's compensation.
This year's.
You have to understand, the New Hampshire retirement system runs a fiscal year that ends in June 30th.
Understood.
So that's why some of these are split up. Will change mid-year, but we have a different calendar. So they closed their books on June 30th, and they have yet to report their annual results. They're right on top of what's going on down there.
Peter?
You had mentioned when we were talking about the full-time wages, that this new number, 1.4 million, 552, 883, is for 2 new officers?
So last year when I asked for 2 officers, knowing that the vote was gonna be in March, by the time I hired and get somebody out, I asked for 2 full-time positions just for 7 months. That's where the 77,000 came from that Scott had mentioned. So this full-time wages here actually is the full complement as far as I know I can ask about, but that does not figure in obviously the lieutenant's retirement or anything else. That would be for the officer if I was full staff right now.
1 officer.
Right.
So that's what you're looking for, is one officer.
But also built into this full-time wages would be the current lieutenant's position. So
Right.
knowing that if I get permission to hire somebody, certainly what he's making, the new officers would be making less than that, so it would still be absorbed in that. If that's
The new budget takes that into account.
right, and, yeah. Yes.
So there is the possibility, given what you said earlier about getting new hires in, you could have two positions open for quite some time, so that this line item would be underdrawn through a good part of the year.
That is correct. I don't hope for that. So right now I have permission to hire one. So as my process goes, obviously, you know, the lieutenant still has, I'm not talking about filling his position because he's got one more day, so that's a bit obnoxious probably. So next week, the deputy chief and I will sit down and talk about that position. So at some particular point, I need to go to the board and ask permission to probably do a promotional process to lieutenant, one to sergeant likely, and then ask for permission to hire somebody else, so. But we are also meeting with the sergeants, and the deputy chief and I will meet next week about, you know, we're putting a game plan together to have another hiring process to get this done, so we can get in there.
But the slots are gonna be open.
Correct, correct.
And if you promote from within, that's still really gonna be two positions that you're still looking to fill.
Well, yeah, so if I promote, typically, usually how it works, a sergeant would go to lieutenant, a patrol officer to sergeant, then I would have an opening in patrol, so I'd have two openings in patrol.
That's the
Yeah.
second,
Right.
thank you.
Anything else?
No, that's fine.
Now, Chief, before you go, if you could possibly talk about your radios, the money set aside in the capital reserve or the improvement plan.
Yep, yep. So, we met with the capital improvement plan to ask for, we have in front of $125,000, I think, over 3 years. We work with S&P Mountain Electronics for our radio equipment. And so, we have a lot of radio equipment right now, quite honestly, that if it was to break today, we have nothing to replace it. The equipment is antiquated, and they don't even make parts for it. So part of OME's plan, working with us as the radio company, is they have created a three-phased tier of what needs to be done over the next 3 years to get us up to where we need to be. And that is replacing hardware and software to most of these radios to get them going. So not only do we have equipment in this building, but we have equipment elsewhere in town, obviously because of the unique geography rather of the town. We have towers in different locations so that officers even standing you know, down on Lily Pond on their portables can actually reach back to dispatch. So there's towers at different locations, and all those towers, as well as some equipment here, all need to be upgraded. So there's a 3-year plan that I presented to the capital improvement committee to the tune of about $125,000 over 3 years to start upgrading all of that stuff so that we're up to speed, and when anything breaks, it's all we have new equipment that's guaranteed and that has warranties and stuff on it.
There's a tentative plan to have a police radio at the town beach in the coming season?
As in a tower or something like that?
No, just a radio, a police radio.
Surplus portable.
Oh, a surplus portable. So that had been asked, so that is something that, we'll look into.
Tentative plan?
Yeah. So one of the things we need to be cautious about that, as I told most people, is, you don't give out police radios to non-sworn people. I don't want civilians getting on the radio. I have no issue if people have scanners and they're listening to it. We're just very limited that we don't give them out to civilians who then people can get on the radio and call and let us know, when they don't have training. We try to avoid that. So, but we are looking into that. I've had that discussion with Scott. Is there any question?
So, if you're looking for a number, and you were to use the selectmen's new budget with the change that the budget committee's proposed in the animal control officer, the number would be $2,945,401. Correct.
2,945,401.
I'll move that number.
Is moved, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jack. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
good one, Chris.
I did wanna mention that the town is currently negotiating with the Teamsters Union, which is the police officers, employees, on the pay package, and so there'll be a separate number attached to that. But I'll tell you right now, last year we, proposed bringing up the starting wage $1.50, and the union rejected that, they took 0. And, this year we proposed bringing it up $2, and they don't seem to be real warm to that either, so it remains to be seen what will come of that process.
Is there some reason they don't wanna raise the wage?
I don't think we should be discussing that.
Yeah.
Because we're in negotiations right now. No offense.
I don't understand the concept.
Well, we want healthcare.
In a nutshell, it boils down to what's in it for me.
Right.
That's where they're coming from. I have no problem saying that.
I'll now turn this to, from one meeting to the other meeting. Made it early.
Good evening, how are you?
Very good. Ready for me, or you guys
Go right ahead.
still want to shuffle some papers and take them over?
We're trying to keep up with like, my hands going.
What, you sleeping on me?
I feel like we got a call at 3:45 this morning. We're supposed to take it.
Is it this that we're
Yes, it's
looking at?
that package.
The small,
Yep.
the small?
Small.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, just the small tree.
Thank you.
So it looks as if you all have a copy of the report and reports that I submitted, presented to the selectmen, what was that, last Wednesday evening, I guess? And was certainly requested to present the same material here this evening, so here I am to present that same material this evening. So you've got a handful of reports. As you go down through the reports, the first is the current cash balance report as of October 22nd. Then it shows a cash flow projection report with the actuals through September 30th. The summary report of all of the town's bank accounts and their balances as of September 30th. Then you get into the year-to-date budget reports, again with actuals reflective of September 30th. A revenue report, a summary by department, detailed expenditures by each department, and then into some ancillary reports, the property tax collection comparison, summary report of the capital reserve funds, and then finally a report of the special and miscellaneous funds. On the revenue side, through 3/4 of the year, our revenues, if you back out the capital reserve fund transfers and the bridge project fund, we're running at about 79.5% collected as compared obviously to 75%, so we are running slightly ahead of what's anticipated, and we are projecting that through the end of the year that we'll collect slightly more than what was anticipated. Again, you know, the 30,000-foot level of the expenditures through 3/4 of the year, all departments are running in line with the exception of a few either departments or one lines that are either front-loaded expenditures or heavily expended through the summer season. A few of those obviously being the IT budget, technology, our insurances, our Lakes Region Mutual Fire Aid, the Parks and Rec seasonal employment, as well as the Highway Department and the road construction and summer projects. One item that I think we talked about the last time I was here that we know is over budget is the LED project, street lighting project through the town that we're ready to go ahead with. Our property tax collections through September remain in line with prior year averages. They've dipped slightly to where they had been. We had been tracking ahead of the 3-year averages, but we are still kind of in the same ballpark, so no real concern there. And our cash flows are strong, and which has allowed us to maintain, or as of October 22nd, have a short-term investment cash balance of $8,495,454, and an operating cash balance of $392,830. Just a side note on our cash flow, obviously, up until the second tax billing is issued, our cash flow will diminish slightly here or there, but certainly we've got plenty of cash flow to get us through to when the tax bills are out and cash flow starts rolling in again. And then our investment balance will again increase, certainly probably by the end of November, and most definitely as we get into December and carry through the first part of the year. If you've had the reports in prior and had a chance to go through them, I'm betting Mr. Skip Murphy's got a few questions.
Actually, to be honest with you, I did not have a chance to do the
Okay.
analysis like I did last time.
Okay.
But I would.
I know one question from the last time that was, that I know you've asked a few times, is on the police department overtime.
Yep.
And I have looked at that, and what, the short answer I can give you is if you combine.
What page?
Page 16 and 17 of 28.
PD overtime?
Yeah, so it shows on the top of page 17, the overtime is overexpended through September 30th of $11,000, $11,008.
Yep.
And so if you combined all three of the wage lines, the full-time, part-time, and overtime wage lines, and group them all together as compensation to the officers of the police department, that actually shows that we've only spent 73.2% of what's been budgeted. So what that tells me is that, and you can certainly see that the part-time wages is underspent by a considerable amount. It's only been, there's 58% spent opposed to 3/4, 75%. So that tells me that they've had difficulty in filling part-time positions, so they've had to fill those with full-time positions, which then would result in overtime. So it's kind of a trade-off as to where those labor dollars are going, but as an aggregate, still well within what's been budgeted.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Well,
If I may skip, I gotta tell you that it's amazing we get any part-timers, because the part-time academy is every Tuesday and Thursday night, and every day, every Saturday, all day for 6 months. How you get people to go through that, I have no idea. So, everyone's struggling for part-timers. Usually the part-timers are retired police, because they're already certified. But to get an average citizen through the academy, very, very difficult.
Because that time is not paid, correct?
I don't believe, it depends on the agency, but my guess would be no.
Now, it's just indicative of the economy where everybody is having problems.
But it's not just that. I'm a part-timer with the sheriff's department. Almost everything you see me wearing, I've bought.
Okay.
And it's the way it is. I mean, I'm not complaining, mind you. But, yeah, these boots I got on are 6 or 7 years old at least. The ones I had before were 13 years old. I'm tight too. So, I know you can appreciate that, Skip.
Yes.
The building maintenance budget is overspent by 15,000.
Page?
yeah, within the buildings and grounds.
It's still 16.
And actually, as I went through several of the buildings and maintenance accounts, in a few of the departments are overspent, so I dug a little deeper. And the one thing that kind of jumped out at me was our HVAC system, our heating system, to Spartan Mechanical alone. This year, we've spent $89,000 worth. 53 of that was part of the replacement project for all of the heaters, but that certainly leaves another almost $40,000 just in maintenance to Spartan for our heating systems throughout the entire complex. Okay, so that's not just within the buildings and grounds, but that's an aggregate of what we have spent to Spartan Mechanical. So
That's just for this building?
No, that's this building, DPW, yeah, yeah. Up at the firehouse, yeah. So,
Selectman, I know it's early yet, but we see any type of energy savings with the new units?
I would definitely say that they are running more efficient. To put a dollar figure on that, I wouldn't venture a guess. I know that, the old units definitely were not very efficient. And these, at least, we can turn on and off. There is a temperature gauge opposed to, low, medium, or high, which the old units had, which really it didn't matter, I don't think, where you had it set, it was always on high. So yeah, so there's definitely, these are definitely better than what was there.
That's for this building we talked about last year.
Correct, yeah, with these units.
Have you talked to anybody at the library about the medium-term viability of their heating system over there?
The geothermal system,
Yes.
I've heard, discussion and comments about it.
So, you know, it looks like we're gonna be facing costs. In 11 years, and it's already, you know, coming
Eroding.
apart. You know, it seems like not a good.
It's all, from what we understand, we were just on the library committee, and that it's because of the water.
Correct.
And, you know, either we,
And also
know
they
if it can
felt
be
that
fixed with the water.
the new building that was built below it has affected the water so that it is worse this year than it had been. The new senior building.
And this building, you can't drink the water, so it's like, you got some.
Chris?
On that note, the high school and middle school sprinkler system after 15 years is corroding, and we just spent a bunch of money to fix spots that were about to blow, and then we got another 50 grand in the budget to replace the rest of it, so.
Didn't something blow in the new middle school?
Yeah, that's why
Because of
they
the
realized how
corrosion.
bad it was, one of the heads let go, but it's all, the water's so, they're testing the water, but I don't know, no resolution yet. Glenn, on the capital outlay on page 23, what does it mean when you have a zero budget item, yet there was money spent there? For, like, highway, like the loader and the sweeper and the town hall improvements.
So if you see the trailing numbers of, so if we look at highway or DPW major equipment vehicles, so it starts off, the account number is 014902837 and then 00.
Mm-hmm.
So the others underneath there are 6164. So in essence, when everything is consolidated to just the major vehicles, so if you cut off the last two digits, it's all budgeted to the DPW major equipment vehicles, and then when we expend the money, we put it to those sub-accounts. So basically, those are sub-accounts underneath
Okay.
the parent one.
Thank you.
All right, that makes sense.
Glenn's question.
Yep.
16 of 28, the cemeteries account.
The
And I know
equipment.
that this is coming up next week.
Yep.
I mean, I take a look at wages and benefits were, God, it was like not even spent. And then operating, you got a few lines that were overspent. What is the reason?
I couldn't
I mean,
tell
was
you,
there,
I couldn't tell you why the wages and benefits. I mean, I don't control who they hire and when they're working. You know, but the cemetery, as far as grounds maintenance and meetings and dues and general supplies, to me, that's, as an aggregate, you know, they spent 97.26, but I don't anticipate they're gonna be spending any more in the last 2 months of the year. I mean, that's all primarily seasonal stuff.
We had our meeting with them, and the minutes just went out, and we did discuss this in detail, and we deferred the discussion to the whole group because it was, there were a lot of issues about hiring that they're having difficulty with.
okay.
So that's, next week.
I have a question on revenue.
Okay.
We have, back on page 7.
Yep.
Other refunds and miscellaneous revenue, to the tune of about, I don't know, 11 million there, but in reality, we have like 65,000. What is that from?
So the miscellaneous revenues would be obviously things that were unanticipated, either that came in that we weren't expecting, or things that we come to find out later that we are going to receive, but then the selectmen did vote to receive those funds. So some of that is in there. Let's see, I don't have a detail of it, but I can certainly get what is made up of that. But that's primarily what it is some of it may be like insurance claim benefits that we might have received from our property and liability.
So for 2019,
Yep.
now that, I'm assuming unless it's something that's a one-time,
Right.
God bless you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Instead of a one-time income revenue, it'll be balanced and then put into where it's supposed to be.
Correct. Yeah, if it's in here, it's a one-time item. It's not something that will be elsewhere.
It just looked large.
Yep.
Scott, question for you. When we sell engine 4, does that money go to the fire department or does it go to the town?
General fund.
General fund, okay.
I have a question on the final page, and this came up when we were meeting with the town. Can you just give me a very quick overview? Where is this, just tell me what these mean, the money's coming in and how does it flow out? Like, for instance, the cemetery fund, the cemetery trustee didn't really have an answer when we asked about that.
So the revenues that are coming in the cemetery fund is obviously
For
the
burials?
sale of lots, sale of miscellaneous items, urns, and those sorts of things.
Okay, and how can that be spent? If they wanted to spend that, how is that spent?
I believe the trustees.
Okay. All right,
Right.
good.
And the current balance is what?
Almost 47,000.
You know, Scott?
I'm not sure. So essentially, it's there's a small portion goes back to the town for general fund revenues. And so this money here is essentially perpetual care.
Okay.
I think that, off the top of my head, that it would take a town meeting vote to spend this money. But I'm not entirely certain of that.
That was a question that came up that maybe
We'll further discuss that next week.
Okay, thank you.
Sue?
I'm curious, is the town and or the cemeteries in the business of selling urns?
I know that they have sold a few.
Why is not the funeral home selling them as they would sell, sell a
I
casket?
don't actually know.
I think they
Why
want
would-
to compete with them and they feel they can make some money.
But it would seem to me that that would be the funeral home's business and not the cemetery's
Yeah.
business to be in that business. I'm a little troubled by that.
We had this discussion last year because I said this is not what government should be in, and basically competing against private industry. And
Correct.
oh well, we can offer it at a much lower price for those who are grieving. And I said at the time, that's not a sufficient reason. And we're not supposed to be making profits on stuff. We provide a service, hopefully just enough cost so it doesn't cost the general taxpayers.
$50 or something like that on it.
Yeah, and
just for their time to. But
right.
We can talk about that.
It seems a little
Yeah.
inappropriate to me.
Yeah.
I think that's the reason when we had our small committee meeting that we asked for it to go to the full board.
Yeah, so we'll
For
do
a
it all
variety
over
of
again.
issues, for a variety of issues that
Okay.
couldn't be addressed with the smaller group.
Was
Okay.
that brought up at your meeting? That-
I'm sorry, I was thinking about something.
But there was a lot of questions
Yeah.
about where was money coming in and going out that couldn't be addressed, and we weren't comfortable not having everyone here.
They pretty much said the same thing Skip said from last year, that they do provide the urns. They're not really urns, they're like little boxes, metal boxes, or whatever else, that they do provide them at a lower cost than the funeral homes.
That shouldn't be the purview of this.
So, all these, special revenue funds, are they, we talked about the special cemetery fund, but are they all kind of run the same way? Where it would take a special warrant article, or are they, I'm jumping here, but from the cemetery fund, but just trying to get an understanding of these on the back page.
No, I mean, my understanding would be most of the rest, if not all of the rest, were established through a warrant article. And then the warrant article would have named who could spend, and the majority of them, again, if not all of them, gave the selectmen the authority to spend.
So pretty much the only one that is not is the cemetery
I think
fund.
that's the only one that's unknown at this point,
Okay.
so there's uncertainty.
So the page before that, every one of those would be by a town meeting vote, either the selectmen or some other agents to expend were designated by a town meeting vote. In the case where there was no designation, then it takes a town meeting vote to take money out of it. The back page are special revenue funds, so those are all different. The sewer fund, the selectmen are technically the sewer commissioners, and they have the ability to spend that money. The recreation fund is the revolving fund, and again, that ultimately gets passed through the selectmen. The ambulance fund is a revolving fund, that too comes under the jurisdiction of the selectmen. Cemetery fund we don't know about. Fireboat fund are unanticipated revenues that the selectmen vote to accept in a meeting, and then authorize those monies to be spent. Conservation Commission has the authority to spend the conservation fund, and then the others are also unanticipated revenues. So every one of them's different, I guess, is the bottom line.
Additional question for Scott? Drug forfeiture fund, that's basically civil forfeiture, where somebody thinks is stopped, they believe a crime, the monies that they might find, or the real property that is associated with that stoppage comes to the town, and the town keeps a certain percentage of that, correct?
Yeah, the money comes through the state or feds. And those laws have been tightened up so that the town can only get money now after someone's been convicted. But there are funds in there from years back where people had their money confiscated without a conviction. I'm glad those laws have been changed.
Yeah, I am too. I don't recall any newspaper articles where Gilford seized monies that were large amounts compared to other areas that I have seen, $40, $50, $60, $100,000. The person was never convicted of anything, then but the money was still not returned. We haven't had a situation like that in your knowledge, right?
I'm not sure what you would define as a big bust, but the town has participated with state and federal agencies in drug busts, and some of that money has come back to the town as a result of that.
But due to convictions.
That's the new law in the state of New Hampshire's convictions.
Okay. Scott, not Scott, I'm sorry, Glenn. Conservation Fund, that's a result of LCHIP, right? Sales of real property, the Conservation Committee gets part of the
Change in use tax.
Change in use tax.
Okay, yeah, okay. So if somebody comes in and develops pasture land, Conservation Committee gets it that way. Because it's a change in land.
Correct.
So it's land taken out of current use.
Right.
Okay.
There's a penalty associated with that. 100% of that penalty goes into the conservation.
Okay.
Anything else? Hearing none? Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, seeing if there's no members from the public here, we can skip public comment. Is there anything else from members of the budget committee? Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah. In addition to getting all this brand new paperwork, Scott, are we gonna get an updated Excel spreadsheet,
I can do that.
please?
Yeah.
Always welcome.
Anything else? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Croc TV.